If the hurried escape from the back door of Villa Somalia on January 26, 1991, was the official death of the revolutionary regime, the long journey to Nigeria was the dark silence before the final burial of Somali nationhood. Can you imagine the feelings of a man who for 21 years was the most powerful person in the Horn of Africa, now sitting on a plane heading to a destination he did not know? President Mohamed Siad Barre, the man who built the strongest army on the continent, whose orders shook the region. What did he feel as he crossed the border, uncertain if he would ever see Mogadishu and its beautiful coast again? Was there heartbreak in his eyes, or did he still believe he was the legitimate president in distress? From 1992 to 1995, the world looked away, but inside a house in Lagos, there was a man holding the secrets of a fallen state and the pain of a collapsed nation. Presents the grand conclusion of the series, The End of an Era. We will delve into the secrets within the house on Victoria Island, the tragic final message he left for the Somali people, and the last moments of his life before his heart stopped in January 1995. Follow us in this fourth and final part, where we conclude the long story of the father of the revolution. In May 1992, after failing in his final attempt to retake the capital, Mogadishu, Siad Barre crossed the Kenyan border. It was not a presidential trip with a red carpet. It was a refugee's journey marked by exhaustion, dust, and despair. A Kenyan government helicopter picked him up at the border, accompanied by a few family members and his last remaining guards. His eyes were red from sleeplessness, thinking of the friends and soldiers he left behind on the battlefields of Gedo. He could still hear the echoes of gunfire in his ears, asking himself, where will Somalia end up? Upon arriving in Nairobi, the president stayed at the famous Safari Park Hotel. But the peace soon turned into political noise and chaos. Hundreds of Somali refugees in Nairobi gathered in front of the hotel. Some were mourning their former leader, seeing him as the man who built the country, while others shouted slogans against his regime. The Kenyan government felt immense international and domestic pressure. Should they grant asylum to an old ally or bow to public outcry? This situation forced the president to seek a destination far from the Horn of Africa, a place where he could no longer hear the cries of his divided people. As the world he once befriended turned its back, Ibrahim Babangida, the then president of Nigeria, stepped forward. Babangida decided to host Siad Barre, viewing him as an African elder in need of sanctuary during a dark time. A private plane sent from Lagos arrived in Nairobi to collect the president. As he stepped onto the aircraft, he knew he was distancing himself from the land to which he had dedicated his entire life. Nigeria became his final home, not by his choice, but by fate. While sitting on the plane, he began jotting down small notes in a little diary he held in his hand. The Nigerian government settled Siad Barre in a massive mansion in the upscale Victoria Island neighborhood of Lagos. The house had beautiful gardens, shade trees, and every amenity, but to the president, it was a golden cage. He was not allowed to leave the house without permission or speak to the foreign media. Nigerian special forces guarded the front gate 24/7. How could a man feared by the world, whose orders once shook an entire nation, be confined within four walls? This was the hardest stage of his life, where his only companions were his memories and old photographs of Villa Somalia. His life in Lagos was divided into two parts: listening to news from Somalia and writing. He had a large radio tuned constantly to the BBC Somali service and the VOA. Every time he heard of the civil war, the mass displacement at Mogadishu's port, and the destruction of the buildings he had inaugurated, visitors said he kept a small office in the house where he stored hundreds of secret documents and writings. He wanted to tell the world many truths, but time was running out. Sometimes, he would switch off the radio, unable to bear the tragic news coming from his country. A heartbreaking event was reported from that house in Lagos. The day he heard on the radio that the city he built, Mogadishu, was divided by a green line between the two factions of the USC, Siad Barre sat down in his chair and wept openly. Tears he had held back for a long time finally flowed. He said, "Has the city I built truly been split in two today? Are the roads I paved now filled with trenches?" He believed his rivals had destroyed the country just to erase the legacy of the state and the law and order he had built over 21 years. Although barred from the press, there are secret interviews he gave during that time, quoted by those close to him. In these interviews, he defended his history and his decisions. He used to say, "I built the people, but the people destroyed the country." He argued that the 1991 uprising was not about democracy, but was based on tribalism that led the country into 50 years of regression. Here, you can feel that until the end, he believed the revolution was the only way to unite Somalia, viewing the rebel groups as having no vision for statehood. Siad Barre knew his minutes were numbered and his body was weakening. He left only one message for his family and visiting friends: "If Somalia does not collapse now, it will be rebuilt." These words showed his fear that tribalism would completely erase Somali nationhood. This was not just political. It came from a man who saw the true impact of the collapse and the civil war the country was drowning in. He would always ask, "Can people not forgive each other to save the country? Is there not a single person who pities Somalia?" In 1994, the president developed severe heart problems and respiratory issues. The psychological weight of his country's destruction and the loneliness of the house in Lagos worsened his health. He began to eat less, spending most of his time in his bedroom, lying in bed. The best doctors in Nigeria were brought to him, but how can a man rest when his memories are burning? His face became very thin, but his eyes remained sharp, staring at the picture of the Somali flag hanging in his room. On the first night of 1995, the president's condition worsened significantly. While the city of Lagos celebrated the new year, a heavy silence and fear filled the house on Victoria Island. He felt intense pain in his heart. In the early morning of January 2nd, he was rushed to a private hospital. Doctors tried to stabilize him, but his heart seemed too tired to continue after 75 years of a difficult life. The hours raced toward the end, with his family surrounding his bed. On the morning of January 2nd, 1995, the news spread across the world. Mohamed Siad Barre had passed away. He died in the hospital while holding his daughter's hand. When the news reached Somalia, the people were divided. Some felt a great chapter of history had closed, while others saw him as the man who started the collapse. His death marked the true end of the revolutionary era. In Mogadishu, some fired guns in celebration, while others wept in their homes, feeling that nationhood had finally died. After his death, a heated debate began regarding his burial place. Mogadishu was not a safe place, as the city was divided by warring clans. The Nigerian government and the family agreed to return the body to the Gedo region. A private plane carried the body from Lagos to the town of Garbaharey. It was the first time a Somali president who died abroad had his body returned to the country to be buried with honor in his birthplace, traveling thousands of miles across sea and land. Thousands of people from the southern regions gathered for the president's funeral in Garbaharey. Although he was a controversial leader, witnesses said his funeral was emotional, and many people wept. He was buried in the Somali soil. Today, his grave lies in Gedo, serving as an example of a man who ruled his country for 21 years, yet ended his life in a foreign house. History does not forgive, but it teaches us that power never lasts, and everyone ultimately returns to the earth. This was the series The End of an Era. We have traveled through the golden hours of construction and the dark hours of the collapse of Mohamed Siad Barre. We saw how a state was built and how it fell. His death in Nigeria teaches us that nationhood is the most precious thing a person can lose. You enjoyed this series? Please subscribe and tell us which leader you want us to feature next. What do you remember, or what have you heard about the death of Siad Barre? Write to us in the comments. Goodbye.